Welcome to my photo friends. I'm your host Joshua. I'm a photographer, and for the past 10 years I've been involved in the Elgin photographic community. Through those years I've met dozens of local photographers. Meeting these photographers brings me genuine excitement. You see, photography can be a very individual activity, since there's only one person that hits the shutter button. By getting to know these other photographers, I get to learn from their passion and knowledge. By sharing these interviews, I hope any photographer can learn and become an even better photographer and artist. Before we begin, I of course have a few people to thank. First off, thank you to my wife. Her wisdom has been essential as I have developed this interview series. She has spent hours hearing my ideas and providing encouraging feedback. She even spent a couple hours reviewing questions with me today. Secondly, thank you to Zion Evangelical Lutheran Church. Zion has opened their doors to the community and has hosted many different groups, and I'm extremely thankful to Zion for allowing us to use this space tonight. Lastly, thank you to Ray, who's managing our recordings. Keith was the first Elgin photographer that I met. I actually met him in a basement almost identical to this, over at the hospital, St. Joe's.
St. Joe's.
It's a meeting area in the middle of the hospital. There's no cell phone reception.
Zero.
But it was a great room, and the hospital was very accommodating.
Right next to the morgue.
Yep, right next to the morgue. So I figured it was appropriate to not only meet in the basement of another religious institution, but we aren't near a morgue this time.
As far as we know.
But also to meet where the Elgin Camera Club meets. Keith is a full-time professional photographer, president of the Elgin Area Camera Club, and on the board of directors for Horses and Heroes. He leads photo workshops, he still develops film, does commercial photo shoots, corporate headshots, and still has time to capture photographs for fun. Keith and I have been personal friends for more than 10 years, and he was the best man in my wedding. What is that? That's great. I'm incredibly excited to hear what he shares tonight and what other gimmicks he has in his bag. Please welcome Keith as my next photo friend.
Glad to be here. Hey, see? Still develops film. This is even...
Does that count as developing, though?
Well,
I mean, you aren't even
developed
really
it.
doing any work.
No.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself and your photographic journey.
Yeah, so I have to thank my mom, really. She was like the family historian when it came to photos, you know, before even I showed up. She drove her 10 siblings crazy, Italian, drove her 10 siblings crazy, and all of her nieces and nephews, because she literally chased them around with a camera. And now, of course, at 91, my cousins and second cousins are coming back to Auntie Ruthie. Do you still have that picture of? Do you? And literally, she cannot park in her one-car condominium garage because it's filled with banker boxes, and most of those are photographs from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and probably the early 90s. You know, although I didn't really follow in her footsteps to grab a camera, but when I started thinking about recording my life in my early 20s, it's like, I'm going to be seeing some pretty cool places in the next 10 or 12 years. I should get a camera. And of course, I was thinking about that because I was in the military at the time. And I knew that my job was going to take me to some pretty cool places. So can you recognize the shoreline down there? Yeah. So this was the first time coming home for the Glenview Naval Air Station air show. And it was a lot of fun, you know. And of course, who was there at the base of the tower waiting for the aircraft to arrive but Mom and Dad, of course. So, but yeah. So that's kind of how I got started with my first camera. I went to the base exchange, bought my Pentax and some film and an extra lens. And, you know, during the rigors of training, it was a nice decompression for me. I don't know how much easier it would have been had we had the internet back then, you know. But learning photography on my own through the back of magazines and articles, and it was challenging, to say the least, until you found a person who could plug a few of those tidbits together, So, but yeah, that's kind of how the journey went through the military, and then I started picking up random photo shoots from squadron mates, from people out in town that I met, and I finally had my first paid gig. It was a saltwater fish tank.
Oh.
That was kind of cool. Yeah. So, and then of course, the standard, babies and, siblings and friends and neighbors and, just to cover the expense of film. And I had my own color darkroom in my base quarters, which was nice. So had I learned black and white first, I would have never had the patience to learn color. But I dove in with color first, and yeah. So that's kind of the early part of the journey.
So you've got, while we're talking about aircraft, this photo has significance. Yeah,
so this was the first photo of mine that was published. It was published in the base newspaper during a transcontinental deployment, and the whole squadron picked up from the East Coast, and we were going to the West Coast, and the paper covered that. But I sat on the left side of the airplane. And if you are semi-conscious here, you kind of feel like you're looking out the right side of the airplane. So I had to hand this camera, my camera, to the guy next to me. I had all the settings going, and I told him to basically corner to corner, make a line and put the airplanes on that line and just take the picture. So it's my picture, but he pushed the shutter button. So I'll give him credit a little bit if I ever see him again. But yeah, so that was the first one that was, and of course they published it in black and white. So yeah, but yeah, fun day.
So you mentioned like the beginning of being a professional photographer. So I often joke that being a professional anything is a lot more about being the businessman side of the profession and less about being the photographer or the, whatever it is. So what does it take to be a professional photographer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had somebody come up to me after speaking at one of the CAPS events, Chicago Area Photography, whatever the S stood for. And the guy was kind of snotty, actually. He was like, I shoot weddings for hire and I do portrait work for hire. Why can't I be called myself a professional? And I says, well, you can call yourself whatever you want. Well, what's the difference then between me and you? I said, I gave him a one-word answer: spares. And he looked at me, and I'm like, you ever show up for a wedding with one camera and 2 lenses and a flash? Yeah, that's all I use. What happens when you trip and fall? Right? So that's one thing. You got to have the equipment, so it's not an excuse to be able to capture the image. So if you do trip and fall, if you do get tangled in your tether cable, once or twice, and you snag your camera right off the tripod, and the client is like, oh, and you're going like that on the inside, but you go back to your camera bag and just pull out another camera and another lens, you just keep shooting, because your client invested sometimes thousands of dollars to prepare for that photo shoot. You can't just walk out on them, So equipment, you've got to have not just the right equipment, but enough of it. And then the second thing is you do need to have a business plan. You can let the client drive you crazy, and you just, the tail is wagging the dog. You're running around reacting all the time, and you're a professional, you're getting paid, but your business is just stuck in the mud. You're just not growing. So you need a business plan, you need goals, you need means to attain those goals, and then be ready for setbacks. Try to anticipate setbacks. Of course, it still happens, but the more you're ready. And of course, before I was a full-time professional, I was in the corporate world for 15 years, so that helped me a lot. Budgets and P&L forms and taxes and forecasting, all that stuff you do in the corporate world, running somebody else's business, making them rich. It's like, wait, I want a piece of that pie. So, yeah.
Before we wander too far off of photography, I did want to bring up one image. I gotta find my mouse. We got something yet?
It's gonna be, it's dark.
That is astoundingly bad.
The flash bar sits up on here, and I couldn't find one, so.
So I know that you have a deep passion for Operation Horses and Heroes.
Yep.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about that organization? You've got this photo.
Yeah, so Operation Horses and Hero, there were 9 of us veterans that started this organization in 2012, trying to help drive down the number 22. And if you don't know what that number is, statistically there's 22 military veterans taking their life every day. And that's a horrible number. And it doubled during COVID, but PTSD is treatable, and equine therapy is a miraculous way of treating it. And so we put together a program, and we started running it first in Illinois, and eventually we've been in 8 or 9 states now. And we're working with volunteers. It's a 100% volunteer run, and it's all about driving down that 22 and giving our veterans tools so when they do feel secluded, depressed, in a place where they shouldn't be mentally, the unseen injury, this program does wonders. And so, and you're doing really well when 3, 4, 5 weeks after one of our programs, you start to get the letters from the families, from the kids. Thank you for giving me my daddy back. Thank you for giving me my son back. Things like that. My spouse is unbelievable. For the first time in 4 years, he smiled at me. It's so, it has enormous impact, but it does work. And we just want to stand in the gap that the VA is having a tough time covering. And because we're a private 501c3, we don't have to report anything back to the VA. We don't have to give results back to the VA. So if any of our veterans are actually getting benefits, which they've earned, for having PTS or traumatic brain injury or anxiety or depression, we don't want to take those benefits away. We just want to heal them so they don't become a statistic. So, and that's kind of what we're doing. We actually have our next program is coming up here in Illinois, the weekend of September 22nd or 3rd, I think. If those of you have a calendar, you can look it up. And it's out in Maple Park. I'm sorry, it's not in Maple Park. It's in Morris, Illinois. So
some of the first photos that I saw of yours of something other than, I think, waterfalls and architecture were of horses from Operation Horses and Heroes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I want to use that as a little bit of a segue. 10 years ago, you and I went on a trip to Door County.
Yeah. Minus what? Yeah.
I don't remember, but this is
that's
one of my...
That's not Door, that's the moon.
So this is one of my favorite photos, and I'll repeat one of our club members. The TV's not doing it justice. But this is out, we're literally on Green Bay. It's frozen solid. And we're walking out, there's a rib of ice that comes out, and I'm up on a little bit of a ledge, and this Antarctic or Arctic traveler is walking by, with nothing in the distance. So that week was spectacular. It was
fun.
Very cold.
Yep.
I remember walking into the diner,
Yep.
the 4 of us that went on that trip,
Yep.
and sitting down and the waitress coming over and saying that she could see the cold rolling off of us.
Yep.
But you lead workshops, not quite as cold, several times per year. So I'm going to go through a few photos, and I want you to just kind of tell us about each of these. The first one I'm going to start with is another horse-themed workshop, or actually I think it's Western-themed.
Yeah, Westerns, cowboys, sure.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the one I do in July. So I just got back from this one. This is the South Dakota Cowboy Workshop and Badlands and Night Sky. Kind of wrap it all up into one. But we use models, we use horses. We're actually at a horse farm or a horse ranch where they are breeding horses, 5th generation horse breeder. And we're actually amongst all of the mares and their new foals, because the foals are between 6 and 10 weeks, and we're having a good time with them. Yeah, we're right there in the middle of them. We have unbelievable access, and our host And you saw Autumn. Autumn's just one of his handlers. She's a model for us, but she's actually a wrangler. And all of our models are full-time wranglers at the very least. So we have a great time. It's a 5.5-ish day workshop, and we've had a lot of fun doing this. We went into an old town that's nearby, and the marshal was handy enough and happy enough to pose for us. And he was all excited. He's a reenactor, of course. But we get really good access to this town and have a great day shooting there. And the whole day is like authentic, turn of the century, 1900s look, dirt streets, wood boardwalks and horse tie-ups. And yeah, it's a great place. Yeah, we had a good time.
All right, we're going to switch gears.
Yeah, so this is the Southern Illinois workshop. This is the one I do in late October, so that one's coming up as well. One of our mornings out at this lake. About half the time we get there at sunrise, we get the fog, so we get some really cool shots. But this is the shortest workshop. This one's only 3 days, and but there's some unique scenery down in Southern Illinois that most people don't realize, and it's just beautiful. And the colors are just amazing. Probably because the air is a little less polluted down there than it is here. So the colors are rich and they stand out and they jump and it's a great time. We rent 2 houses and we just stay there for the Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, and half-day Sunday.
All right.
So North Dakota. This is an amazing one. Mid-September, so that's the next one coming up. Still room. And... But that's the Lignite Church. This is a fun story, actually. The lady who owns this church came out when the group was out at this. We're right at the fence. This entire yard is a corral for her horses, and or pasture, I guess is the right word. And we're literally at the fence taking pictures. And she comes flying in the biggest pickup truck I've ever seen. And she slams on the brakes and does like a half turn. And you better not be. You guys aren't hunters. We're like, no, we're not. I'm so sorry. And then she started realizing we're taking pictures of this church. Well, this church used to be in the town of Lignite, and her father bought it when they were going to tear it down to become a place to store horses and hay. And he moved it onto his property about 4 miles out of town, and it's been standing there ever since. And the church, I believe, was built right around the 1900s. And it just sits out there completely exposed, never gets painted, they built them well back then. Because if you ever look, one day you're not doing nothing in January, go to the Minot weather station and look at the winds and the temperature. But yeah. Yeah, last day going back to Bismarck, we hit some thick fog. And of course, we shoot our way back to Bismarck, not like physically, but photographically. It's not that rough of a neighborhood yet. But we're heading back to Bismarck, and the fog, and I knew like 3 phenomenal places, and this was the second one. And I've got a lot of pictures of this in all seasons. I love the fog one. And the whole workshop is based on abandoned and ruins. So from sunrise to sunset, from Sunday afternoon through Friday afternoon, we're hitting, I have 400 targets. It would take 6 weeks to shoot them all. So 10 to 15 a day, depending on how far we travel and what the sunrises and sunsets might do for us.
And I'll just interject here real quick. So for each photographer, and Ira can attest to this, I've said 5 to 7 photos. Keith sent me 83.
81.
And he goes, can you pick? So I knew that the workshop photos would be interesting, but this is his slideshow, not my choice. All right, back to another trip that you take, I think, every year.
This is the winter workshop. This one moves around, but the last 3 years it's been in the southern section, if you will, of Wisconsin, in the driftless zone or the driftless area, which is kind of like west of Madison all the way to Prairie du Chien in about, it's probably 50 miles north of the Illinois border. And it's just beautiful terrain. There's beautiful red barns buried in these valleys, the Hyde's Mill, or turquoise barns. You just never know with those Wisconsinites. But this is a dairy farm, and they have a turquoise barn, and now it's full of goats. So yeah, but it's a good place. It's right on an intersection, so bring that 14 millimeter.
And then this is the last trip.
Yeah, Oregon.
Yeah.
So I've been doing Oregon in the spring, 2 trips. The northern coast from, say, Newport up to the border, and then the second trip is from south of Newport down actually to the redwood forest in Colorado or California. Do they have redwoods in Colorado? I think they cut them all down. Anyway, so we kind of divide the coast in half and do 2 full weeks in each time, and it's pretty much all coastline. On the northern side, we get into the forest and get some beautiful fog mornings, filtered light through the trees, and of course the one day in the redwood forest. Yeah, and Oregon coast.
I think this is also from Oregon, but
yeah.
This photo, because that's you, right?
That's me.
Yeah, yeah.
So Thor's Well, a lot of people will recognize pictures of Thor's Well, but it's a challenging climb to get out to it. It's a lot of that volcanic kind of jaggedy rocks, and you know, about half of my clients are up in age and retired, nimble, but they know their limits, and they see these rocks, and they're like, I'm not going out there. So a couple of them stayed behind, and one guy switched lenses, and he was capturing me. And of course, it looks like I'm going to get completely showered here, but the water goes straight up, and it pretty much falls straight down. And then the idea, the better shot, in my opinion, is kind of like a waterfall. As the water is flowing back down into the hole, you do a 3-second, 2-second exposure, right? So 10-stop neutral density, especially on a sunny day like this. So you can get that nice long shutter, and it just looks really cool. But I like that picture's hanging in my studio, actually. I like that picture. So
yeah, and I didn't choose the other Thor's Well photos, so I apologize.
Oh, that's all right. Just look it up on, it's online. Somebody's got a shot of Thor's Well.
So I want to go back to the rest of the photography business aspect.
Sure,
because you have a few photos here, and I want to talk a little bit about how your photography business has evolved over the years. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to toss up a photo, and we'll wander in a direction. So
yeah, so product or catalog photography is a big part of what my clients ring me up for. Most of the time, they have exactly the way they want it to look, and I don't really are given the option to deviate from it. And most of it's pretty boring, I'll be honest, with product photography. But every once in a while, I convince them to just let me shoot something the way I'd like to shoot it, and this was one of the examples. This thing heats water. That's it. It's just a pot. It heats water. And so I kind of just did a one light black background on a black pot from the side and just kind of highlighted it without trying to make it look too fancy or too artsy. But, I guess it projects okay. I liked it. They loved it. They thought it was really good. In fact, the second time around, they had me do more. So.
And then we've got a couple other product
here's
photos.
The really sexy. Let me tell you, this stuff is all right. So great client. I love these guys. They treat me well. Their warehouse is right here in Elgin, but they're a distributor more than anything else. So don't look up the name on the bag because you won't find them. But these rubber gloves are for handling high voltage. So Joshua thought it was for chemistry, and it might work for chemicals. But these doggone things are so stiff they stand up on their own. So that helped. And then the leather ones, of course, in the foreground. But, they literally spell it out. I want this bag, these gloves, and these gloves just like this. I'm like, okay. So right? So you're still a service industry, even though you're artsy.
Yeah. And then a little bit more creative.
Yeah, this is event photography. So there's an organization here in Elgin that plays music for a living. And they have videographers, and they have all kinds of audio going on. They sometimes do live audio and play it on the radio. And so they've got some cool stuff. And so when I'm out there capturing the event with still photography, I'm just looking for new and different ways of showing the same old thing, if you will, right? Because anybody could take a picture of a musician. I mean, you know, it's not that challenging. But I saw the video guy. He was kind of like the, I don't know what you call the video guy that does all the controlling, the director or something.
Sure.
So he had his laptop up and all 5 cameras were plugged in, and he was talking on the headphones, and that's his backup pair, and just kind of giving directions. And I thought, I'd kind of like that shot. So I tapped him on the shoulder, and I just had him lean back, and so, but that's event photography. That's one of the events. I joke around. I'm a huge music lover, but this definitely was not my genre. In fact, I commented I'll say it out loud in public, hello, that the music was so bad the musicians were wearing masks, okay? So it's not true. It was just very creative music, a little bit outside my comfort zone. But the blue lighting made it, I loved that, so I was having a great time photographically and trying to incorporate some kind of an artistic exposure, right, with what I had available. So.
And then along the lines of musicians.
Yeah, so this guy is actually the director of the event. He's one of the program directors. Chamber music on the Fox, by the way, for those of you music lovers, look him up. The tickets are on sale for next year. But Mark Fry is also a very accomplished trombonist, but that's not a trombone, that's something else. Somebody in the audience knows. He told me, say it out loud. Sousaphone? No, it starts with an E, I think. Anyway, again, you can tell my music prowess is low. But he needed some headshots. He does play for Lyric Opera House, so he's, again, very accomplished. And so we did a shoot, one of the alleys in Elgin.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And then a little bit different of a product shot.
Yeah, nice, huh? So his wife calls me up. She wants to do a birthday present in his second Lamborghini, his newer one. And she was going to leave it up to me when and how we do it. And the way the calendars were working out, it just so happened that it fell on the longest day of the year. You know, so June, whatever, 21st. So we literally met at the planetarium at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning to get set up to start the shooting, and then moved our way out to Wacker to get some cityscape shots at 6 or 6:30 in the morning. This is a weekday morning, but it's so early yet, there's nobody out there. So we were having a good time, a beautiful car. And I took a little advantage of the situation and tried to do some like product style photography when he wasn't in the shot, but he was probably in 90% of the pictures. So I mean, it's his car.
Along those lines,
Yeah.
like that migration from the clients dictating to I'm, in creative control, and that's why I brought up the photo of the laptop with the camera setup. That's your creation.
Right.
Is there a point at your when you're using your camera where you're not creating art?
Yeah, I would have to say when I'm more or less on autopilot based on what the client says, you must shoot it this way. There's not a lot of art there. It's the art might be knowing how to light it the way they need it lit. That's more of experience than art, if you will. But then when I get into the event side of it, like the computer you showed, oh my gosh, yeah, nightmares. I still can't sleep after that shoot. I just completely lost where I was going with that. Anyway, yeah, when is it art, when isn't it, right? There's not a whole lot of art here. This is controlling reflections. I'm shooting a safety helmet visor, and it's plexiglass, and it's also tinted. So it's like a giant mirror, So 4 lights, you can only see 2 in this shot. Gigantic black panels and some patches, and it fills up a pretty big room.
But that's the end result.
But when you're done, you have reflections where you need them because it's black, right? So you need to show the edges and the rings, but also you can see through the smoked glass, and so client was very happy.
Yeah.
They even paid me. So there you go.
That is the purpose of owning a business,
It's
is to
very
get
much so.
paid. So the last photo that I have from the professional side,
Yeah.
or at least I believe it's from the professional side, you didn't give me any context for this photo.
Oh, okay.
But it says Fermi in it. So I
Oh.
think this is a story that you and I have briefly talked about.
Yeah, let me wet the whistle here. So I do contract work for Fermilab, and this was actually the first job I did for them. Is the date on here? It was in early December, I think in 23, and they built this device called a neutrino detector. And neutrinos are smaller than protons, neutrons, and electrons, so they're really tiny. And they launched these things from an old gold mine in South Dakota and shoot it straight line through the crust of the earth to Batavia, where this thing's down in a hole and it's picking it up. Well, this box, super sensitive to light and is incredibly delicate, but they couldn't build it near where that needs to be stored. It was built 2.5 miles away on Fermilab, so they had to move it. And I have to give them credit. It was military precision how they moved this thing. And they'd practiced with it. I mean, the day before they had mock-ups. They had accelerometers on the truck to measure tilt and acceleration, and because if it was out of tilt, something would break, and it was like a bazillion-dollar machine, right? So, yeah, it was just fun. It was very cold. It was early December, and it was unseasonably cold, and I hadn't been outside enough yet, even though I was out earlier in the year. I wasn't all that acclimated. But the engineers that were part of this, they were out there in just like a business suit, and corduroys and a t-shirt, and they were so fired up they didn't know it was like 10 degrees. So, but yeah, but this monstrosity crane, after they got it off of its rollers and out from under the building, it had to pick it up and put it on a flatbed and then drive the 2.5 miles. And all of the engineering and design and build team walked behind it all the way in like no winter clothes. That was the most impressive part to me.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You and I met through Camera Club.
Yep.
And in the years since, I've seen you encourage and educate many photographers at Club. Mm-hmm. What's the value of a photography group or a club? And I'm going to bring up a couple of photos.
Oh, yeah.
So this is...
That was back in St. Joe's in the basement, yeah.
Yep. This is the basement where I met Keith. The evening that I met Keith, we had tables laid out and we did a macro workshop.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I recognize a lot of those heads, too.
Yeah, I don't remember what this presentation was, but this presentation I distinctly remember because that's my oldest daughter.
Yep.
We had a portrait photographer come in and illustrate single light setup. Mm-hmm. And then I picked this one on purpose because that's Doug.
There's Doug, yeah, yeah.
But he did a wet plate demonstration during our club. So back to the original question.
Yeah, so photo groups are kind of why I started doing workshops. There's a lot of minds that come together, obviously, in a group, and we all see things in a very different perspective. And when we start staying on a single topic, the different minds all start to help build this knowledge base. And your experience and my experience and his experience all starts to come together, right? And there's a great analogy I heard about this, right? So we all know that knowledge is important, right? Well, it's great to have the knowledge that a tomato is a fruit. But wisdom is also really important because it's also wise to not put a tomato in fruit salad, right? So the same thing that we're doing in these photo groups as a camera club or on the workshop is we're still collectively using everybody else's experiences to help share, educate, learn, reinforce. I'm always learning on a workshop, and I'm the host. The travel time from stop to stop in the van is just a plethora of knowledge that just fly. And most people are way too deep in the software than I am, but I learned some cool stuff.
So you kind of led straight into my second half of that question.
Did I? Yeah. Sorry.
You're also a Chicago Area Camera Club judge.
Oh, yeah. Fur and feathers.
We've had a lot of fun doing the judging, but it's difficult to judge art.
Yeah.
With CACA judging, you get 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Correct.
And so an image comes up on the screen.
As a score, yes.
Yeah, as a score, and you have to give it a number.
Right.
But how does judging photography help others with their photography skill?
Well, the way we do it in our camera club, it's tremendous. And it hurts me to say it, but some of the other camera clubs, I think it does more damage than good, because they just throw out a score and move on. And the maker never gets to hear the reason for that score, okay? I mean, I've put some solid things in that I thought were great pictures, and I would ask the judge later on if they didn't bolt right away, hey, how come you only gave that a 7? How come you only gave it? And he points out like the most obvious thing that I had tunnel vision, didn't see it, okay? So as judges, if we're not critiquing these images and giving a chance to understand why or what we saw and scored it the way we scored it, we're not doing anybody any good services. We're making them angry. Some people might be a little tender-hearted, and so we just throw the score of an 18, which means I found it in focus and I found it well
lit.
Well lit, yeah. So it's in focus and it's properly exposed. It's an 18. Well, to somebody who spent 35 hours in Photoshop and changing it and doing this and doing that and drove all the way up to Milwaukee, well, that's a slap in the face. You get 3 in a row like that, you're like, you know what? I need a new hobby. And so but they never saw the dust spots in the sky, right? Because they never saw the dust spots. So sometimes it's obvious. But if we're not going to share the reason why we scored it the way we scored it, I think it's a big disservice to being in competition. That's personal opinion, but I'm going to stick with it.
All right, my last question.
What?
Tell me a little bit about the times that you have the freedom to create your own photos when you're not on the job. And I have a great illustrative photo for this.
You do? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So my buddy, the chef, by the way, he runs the Culinary Fox Cafe here in Elgin. Fabulous place. He's got his own garden, the shishito peppers. I just like saying shishito. Say it with me, shishito. It's great, you know. Well, I got a bag of peppers, and there was a red one, you know. And of course, Joshua knows me well enough that I dare to be different. So I actually shot that on a cutting board that I had to buy for a product shoot. Still had it. Why throw it out? Only used it once, now twice. And I kept just dropping the peppers because I wanted them to look natural, you know, and then I kind of took the red pepper and I just kind of flipped it up, and that's where it landed, and I photographed it. And I put it in competition, and it did absolutely what I thought it would do. I think I got like a 19, which is one judge gave it a 7, the other 2 said, well, it's in focus and it's well lit, but there's no art there, there's no fur, no feathers. So, but that's okay. I had fun with it. But I'm one of the few guys that gets to work in his hobby, because this started as a hobby for me in 1984, you know. And so to be able to live and work full time doing my hobby, there's overlap sometimes between what I'm doing for fun versus what I'm doing for hire. But when I get a chance to go out and shoot, I go out and shoot.
And then you and I.
Oh, you
did
had
it go?
It was
there.
There it is.
There it is. You
Yeah.
and I stood on a rooftop for this one.
Yeah, we kind of talked about doing this shoot for a few months and kept waiting for the weather to be what we wanted it to be. And we were on the parking garage of some hospital, I think. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be a beautiful, clear night, and the sun was still north of west, and it just brass light hit all those buildings, and I was tickled to death. We got some great shots that night, and of course, you know, now with all the AI crazy stuff and what people are doing, you never know what to believe, but that's pretty much right out of camera. I was having fun with it. I think I was still doing 3-shot HDR.
You removed the UFO.
I had to, it was marked top secret, so
Oh, okay.
I still have that background. I probably still have a security clearance somewhere.
No, I've enjoyed going downtown Chicago with you.
It's
we
fun.
have a blast.
Yep.
light trails, architecture,
Yep.
and sometimes sunsets.
Sunsets, yeah. We did that one. Hart was with us, and I think, I don't remember who else. We did the light trails over the expressway, and
Yep.
and that was the day I forgot my tripod. So Hart loaned me his between shots. That was very nice. And of course, I suggested Hart get a new one. Did you ever get a new one?
I have a new one this summer.
Outstanding. Good job. It was a little wobbly. But yeah, we got some great shots.
Yep. It started out raining that night.
It was raining a little bit, yeah.
Yep.
Which sometimes makes for a great ground effect. So nice reflective.
Other folks' questions?
If you were to start over today and you were trying to go into business and you didn't want to use social media, how would you go about building that up?
Wow.
Let me repeat it. So if you were going to restart your business
Yep.
today, but weren't dependent on social media, how would you build your business?
So I hear that as how would I market my business? How would I build my business? I actually only use social media for my workshops, so I really don't use it all that often. You don't see much business to business stuff out there. The website, the horsepower of a website and search engine optimization, that's where you want to deep dive and use that to your benefit, because people are going to use keywords and they're going to search certain things, and you just need to be found. Social media still can help, but if you're working brides and babies, that's your best friend. If you're into business to business, I mean, you could try LinkedIn and using that, or some of the newer platforms that are out there that business owners are reading. But you got to have a phenomenal website that has great SEO. And SEO is not one and done. You have to continually work search engine optimization, and it's worth its money if you have to pay somebody to do it. Even if you start slow, that's it's your best friend. So yeah. Social media, maybe I'm wrong, but for me anyway, social media is all about the freebies. People call you up, they want freebies. And I got nothing against 501c3s, I run one. But don't call me up and tell me I'm going to work 9 hours on a Saturday for the exposure. Think of the exposure you'll get. It's like, yeah, when my bank starts cashing exposure, I'm in. Does that help?
Hart?
So you do your workshops, you do product shoots, you've gone and done event shooting, you also do work in your studio printing or things for people. What's the majority of your income? Is it from one side or another? I mean, how do you actually make a living doing this? Is it primarily the products, or is it the workshops?
Yeah, great question. So right before COVID, the workshops were getting ready to replace the income of the day-to-day grind, the business to business. And that was the plan. I want to retire and just do workshops until I can't walk anymore, and because I love them. They're a blast. They're fun to plan. They're fun to do, the meet people just in the planning phases. But right now it's back to the business to business photography. Corporate headshots like tomorrow, all day, corporate headshots. The catalog photography, the tabletop product photography, talking head videos. We didn't talk a lot about videos, but I do a lot of interviews with a business owner who wants his or her story on their webpage, on the About Us. It's real simple stuff. It's not challenging at all. I'm not a Hollywood producer with 19 cameras, 4 sound effects machines, and the wind, no. 3 cameras at most, 3 or 4 lights, and we talk, and I mic you up, and that's about it. But the business to business stuff is still probably more than 50% of my income right now. But workshops are starting to come back again. People are starting to get back out, and again, the majority of my workshop clients are right at, or they're early retirees. So they're 55 to 70, and the recent economy, people are kind of scared to spend money frivolously And to them, maybe your workshop is a little frivolous versus buying gas for your SUV. So it's coming back. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Besides the business photography, what is your favorite kind of photography?
Yeah, great question. I get asked that a lot, even on the job at a site. So what's your favorite thing to take pictures of? And I don't really have an answer because I don't know, Mom, sorry, I don't know if I'm ADD or not. I've never been diagnosed, but all of the indications and stories about me as a kid tell me I probably am a little bit, or ADHD or something. If I have to keep shooting the same thing over again, I'm bored to death. So as long as I'm shooting something newer or a newer variation of it, or I haven't done it in a while, that's my favorite thing today. You know, and so that's why the workshops are so diverse, because they're all different. I would never want to do 4 weeks in a row of North Dakota or 4 weeks in a row of South Dakota, all the cowboys. As fun as it is, I think I would be less enthusiastic with my clients because it's boring. So, you know, I don't know if I have a favorite. You know, I know what I don't like. I don't like shooting visors. But they pay well, so I'm going to keep doing it. I know that's probably not the answer you're looking for.
It was.
Okay, yeah. So whatever, you know, that's probably why I never got into a single niche. There's a lot of corporate or professional commercial photographers that only do this. You know, I love to shoot food. It's a great time. I can't do it all day, every day. You know, I love to do headshots. It's fun to meet the different people. I don't want to do it every day. You know, I like working in my studio, but I don't want to be there every day. So tomorrow I'll be in somebody else's studio, or I'll be in somebody's office. And just, I like the variety. It keeps me, I guess it keeps me interested. So.
Any other questions? No?
By the way, I think that got a little lighter.
It did. It did.
So.
It's still, I mean.
Well, it's designed for a flash inside. I mean, this isn't a little film camera.
I look
just a
very
Polaroid.
ghost-like.
No, that's kind of what you look like.
Oh. I'm going to take that as the weirdest compliment ever.
Yeah, yeah. So, not bad. SX70 Polaroid.
I have a similar question.
Yeah.
So, what do you prefer? Digital, film, Polaroid?
Yeah, what do I prefer as far as medium? I'll give you a little story because we have a little time, right?
Sure.
So about 3 years into the digital crave, and my whole studio has been flipped over now from film to digital. And I still had the camera store here in town, so the studio was in the back of the camera store. I was just hating what I was seeing as results. And I knew it wasn't the camera because I was getting good results from that camera early on, but it's like the pictures were they just looked lifeless to me. They were dull, dead, you know. And I couldn't really figure it out, but I'm, 3 years into shooting digital now, and I remember my high school football coach, Ray Jacobson. By the way, he's now in the Illinois State Football Coaches Hall of Fame or whatever. Down there, yeah. Ray Jacobson, great man. Whenever you're struggling, go back to fundamentals. So I loaded up my Hasselblad, which has no bells and whistles on it. I had to dig it out, dust it off. I had to find it first, okay? No light meter, handheld light meter. Had to do the math, and literally shot 4 hours to shoot 12 pictures in the back of my yard, just in my backyard. And I metered everything, measured the hot spots, measured the shadows, measured everything in between, looked at the ratio between the brightest f-stop and the darkest f-stop, and went back to the fundamentals of properly exposing an image. And I'm like, yeah, I stopped doing that. I became the guy I made fun of, the spray and pray. Brrr, right? Hey, I could do it in a studio. I don't have to do it at a park, right? I could do it in a studio. Just turn the thing on and burp, right? Take a bunch of shots and pick the best of the worst ones and do a little Photoshop magic, and there it is, a nice dull image. So, so what I did is for 3 months, I shot every day. I shot my Hasselblad, not professionally. I just did it in the yard or in town. I live close to the Fox River, so I could walk down to the river, and I was just shooting wildlife and dead frogs and whatever, right? And I just reintroduced myself to the pattern of looking at light density, depth of field, you know, ratio of brightest to darkest, and just composition, the whole thing. And it kind of just stayed with me. But I'll still, once a year, I'll run a roll through the camera to make sure I stay in that habit, because it's easy to get away from it. Professionally, workflow-wise, digital is phenomenal. I mean, you cannot beat the speed at which you can post-produce. Today's newer cameras shooting at 125,000 ISO, at f/16 on a dreary night, and getting a very usable image. You're not doing that. I don't care how much money you paid for your Hasselblad. You're not getting that. I love film. I love what it does. To me, the best print you'll ever get is a fiber-based black and white print on a black and white negative. It will be the richest, most in-depth black and white photo you'll ever see. But they're almost impossible to replicate today. So you can't do that with digital. And now, printing-wise, it pains me that even the best labs are getting away from chemical printing because of the convenience. And they throw archivability out the window. They claim, that it has a 200-year simulated life. Well, I'm looking at 200-year-old prints. They're not quite, but 1880 what? We're almost there. 160-year-old prints, and they've stood the test of time, unsimulated, on the wall, hanging up on display, not buried in a book 16 feet underground, like they're simulated, whatever. So I have a romance for film, but in the production world, it's got to be digital for me. Yeah. So.
As always, this was a lot of fun.
I had fun. Thank you. Yeah. If it was lighter in here, I'd take a few more pictures for $4 each.